We have an exciting program with a great panel of speakers that are here to really share their clinical and financial experience developing and running a Mevion Proton Center. So first, Mevion was founded with a very clear purpose in 2004 by a group of passionate people for proton therapy. The goal or clear purpose was to provide superior proton therapy to as many cancer patients as possible. And like all of you, we are singly focused. We have a single passion, which is proton therapy. And you will experience that from our speaker. So with Mevion technology, what we did when we started, we looked at where the market was. And the market was with technology that was great from a clinical standpoint, but was very expensive to develop on a $150 to $300 million project costs. These were standalone centers and difficult financial performance. So what we did is, with Mevion compact technology, we completely transformed this market. And today you can see these pictures, which I love to show, because this is a replacement of a conventional radiation therapy machine. This picture is taken at in the Netherlands at Mastro Clinic, where they replaced one LINAC and they constructed a proton center. The whole project cost was just 30 million, and it's always interesting to say just 30 million. It's still a very high price, but it is much more affordable. Completely integrated within radiation oncology and provide today a successful financial break-even, and we're very proud of that. So Mevion leadership has grown over the years. We started the first patient treatment in 2013 in Washington University. Since then, our footprint has grown tremendously a lot with NCI comprehensive cancer centers. Our technology has allowed full integrations, the ability to think and ramp up, to think of one room and then ramp up to a second room, which is what most of our customers today are doing. Today in the US, 62% of the clinical operating single-room compact centers are Mevion, and we're very proud of that. And they are all successful clinically and financially. So Mevion has a track record in disruptive innovation. We started with the inventions of the compact single-room proton therapy technology in 2013. In 2018, we brought the Hyperscan pencil beam scanning, which was the first commercial proton MLC for true IMPT, bringing the technology that we are familiar with in IMRT into proton therapy. We're continuing today, and you'll hear some of our speakers here, with our innovations, with faster and sharper IMPT delivery, really taking advantage of our MLC. Advancing at GRT integration, you'll hear some of the integration with a CT on rail and why it is so important to have the high-quality imaging. Advanced gating integration, the ability to turn on and off very rapidly, pulse-to-pulse beam, and a flash program and accessories, which is a very exciting program that you'll hear from our lead technical development team. So we also guided by a very experienced medical advisory board, and we're very grateful of that, and some of you are here today. This continued to be very important in providing us support for product development, developing corporate strategies, which is very important to support the growth of proton therapy. Sorry for that. So Mevion in the past 12 months has had great success. We've continued to grow. The pandemic, as for everybody, was a difficult time, but we've been continuing to grow over the past 12 months, shipping accelerators, continuing to finalize constructions and acceptance testing to start clinical work, as you will hear from the Huntsman Cancer Institute. Very proud of, one thing we're very proud is being able to bring proton therapy to patients. And we have two important milestones that just happened this month, and you'll hear from one, is 1,000 patients treated at Orlando Health Cancer Institute and 2,000 patients treated at the Ackerman Cancer Center. These were centers that started in 2015 and today are treating on a daily basis 30 to 50 patients a day. So very proud of that and very grateful to have been able to provide proton therapy to these institutions. So with that, we have a great panel of speakers today. Dr. Skip Rosenthal here from Mevion will introduce them. Thank you.
Thank you, Lionel. I'm Skip Rosenthal. Good afternoon. I'm from Mevion, and I'm happy to be back at NAPT after a long COVID winter up there. And I have the pleasure of introducing our speakers. Well, we know that Mevion has great technology, and this year we really wanted to present some of our great partners who bring the benefits of protons and to their patients and their communities really across the country. We're going to hear from Dr. Ackerman, Dr. Thompson, and Dr. Pape, who treat their patients from Florida to Kansas to Utah. We're also going to learn about the path to develop a physician-owned proton center from Keith Potter, the CEO of Kansas Center Urology Care. We know that they can do great things in Kansas City with teamwork. We learned that last night. And also Brian Donahue, president of Union Equipment Finance up in Nebraska. And finally, Dr. Rocky Owen has an exciting update on Mevion's FLASH program, so stick around. It's all very exciting. First up, Dr. Scott Ackerman, medical director and founder of the Ackerman Cancer Center in Jacksonville, where he delivers the highest quality proton therapy with the greatest efficiency per room than any other proton center. That's quite an achievement for his patient-centered approach. Tell us about success there. Thanks.
Skip. Thank you, Skip. Good. Nice to be here today. It's good to see all of you. So I guess I advanced this to get to my slide. Perfect. So thank you all for having me today. I hope lunch is good. I hope to have some soon. So let me tell you a little bit about Ackerman Cancer Center. I was asked to speak today about our reaching our 2,000th patient milestone. So this past week, we treated our 2,000th patient with our Mevion unit. And let me tell you a little bit about myself and about our practice, and that kind of will help you understand how we got to where we are with 2,000 patients. So I moved to Jacksonville in 1988. I just finished my residency, and when I moved to Jacksonville, I went to a hospital there called St. Vincent's Medical Center. It's a 540-bed hospital, not-for-profit hospital. I thought I died and went to heaven. I went to Jacksonville from New York City where I was doing my residency. It's clean and people were nice and there's sunshine everywhere. It was wonderful. And then it's 88. So 7 years later in the mid-90s, I found that a lot of our patients were living farther away, that the community was growing, patients were living farther out, and people weren't opting for treatment. If people live far away, women with breast cancer would have mastectomy instead of lumpectomy because of the drive, or men with prostate cancer were opting for prostatectomy as opposed to radiation treatment. So I opened 2 offices in the suburbs of Jacksonville, one about half hour south of Jacksonville in an area called Mandarin, where our Mevion unit is now, and one north, about an hour north, in Amelia Island, Florida. Amelia Island's a resort community you may have heard of. It's also a retirement community, and that for us, that's a good demographic. We have we're very busy up there because of the demographic of that area. And this has allowed us to provide access to care for the patients that we were seeing at the hospital in Jacksonville. And it allows us to provide access to patients all over the city. And in early 2000s, I wanted to incorporate proton therapy into our practice. A lot of the larger institutions around the country were putting in big steel protons. And I knew that there were clinical trials then, and I just knew the future was that there would be lots of clinical trials showing the efficacy of proton therapy and the advantages of proton therapy over conventional radiation therapy. So I wanted to find a way to incorporate it into my practice, a way that was reasonable, cost-effective, and manageable. Certainly for our private practice, having a big steel proton was not the solution. It's too much. We would be biting off more than we could chew. That's way too much for us. We needed to find a solution that we can incorporate into our own existing practice. So in the mid-2000s, I met with some Mevion staff, Lionel and Skip actually met with back in 2006, I think. In 2007, we signed a contract, a design-build contract in 2007. We broke ground on our facility in 2013. A year later, 2014, we took delivery of the cyclotron. And over that year, a little bit over a year, we installed it, commissioned it, and we're ready to treat our first patient in May of 2015. And not just our first patient, but our first day we treated 4 patients. So our first day of operation, we treated 4 patients on April 30th of 2015. We had a deadline, a financing deadline that said we had to treat by the end of April. So we treated 4 on that day. And so in less than 7 years, that was April 30th, so less than 7 years, we just celebrated the completion of treatment of our 2,000th patient. And now what I'm here to talk to you about is how we got such efficiencies, how we were able to see that many patients, and with having only 1 room. You hear about these milestones from a lot of the big steel facilities. 2,000 patients in less than 7 years is a lot of patients. And you look at it per room basis, that's over 350 patients per, did I do that right? Yeah, it's over 300 patients per year in that room. But before I do that, I want to give you a little taste of our practice. And the taste of our practice is a testimonial from a patient, which gives you kind of the feeling of our practice and the flavor of our practice. Maybe I have to hit it again.
One of the most impactful experiences for me at the Ackerman Cancer Center was actually the first Wednesday night dinner I attended. In comes Dr. Ackerman. He comes in and says, "Hey, Reggie, have you started your treatment yet?" So I'm kind of rolling my eyes. "I still have 2 weeks to go, Doc." He sat and looked at me, and he walked outside of the room. He came in maybe 20 minutes later. He said, "Come on, we're going to start your treatment now." And I'm going like, "What? We're going to start it now?" I started my treatment the very first night I showed up for the Wednesday dinner. Well, that's a big deal to me because I'm an RVer. I'm stuck on the ground, staying in town, and I can't go anywhere. So with me getting started 2 weeks early, that means I could get out of here 2 weeks early. I can get my cancer treated 2 weeks early. So I'm as happy as I could ever be the first night there. So I got started with my treatment that Wednesday night and got done 2 weeks ahead of schedule.
So now that we had our machine delivered in 2015, it was delivered, installed, commissioned. Now the difficult work begins, and that's finding the maximum utilization of our unit. We wanted to utilize it to its highest ability, to our highest ability, for 2 reasons. One, the most obvious, is that we have expenses to pay. We got to pay for this thing. And the expenses aren't just to repay the capital that we needed to purchase the machine and build out the room. And as you heard from Lionel a few minutes ago, it's a lot cheaper, but still it's a lot of money, $30 million. And so the machine and the room, we have to repay that capital. But also, we have ongoing expenses. We have physics expenses. So we purchased over $1 million worth of physics equipment for QA testing. And ongoing expenses of service, the extra staff that we need associated with the proton unit. We have more physics staff than we had before. Those guys and gals aren't cheap. And utilities, even though the Mevion unit uses less electricity, less HVAC than other units, it still costs us $100,000 a year just for utilities to run that machine. So these are all expenses that we have to pay. We want to be sure we have the money to do that, and so using the machine efficiently will help us do that. And number 2, we want to make sure that the more patients that we're able to treat, the more we will remain relevant in the community and more will be a ubiquitous group in the community. We want to be able to maintain the ability to provide access to care. We're not an academic, we're just a community radiation oncology practice, and one of our principles is providing access to care, equitable access to care to patients in Jacksonville. And by being able to have enough time slots during the day and getting patients in through our system allows us to stay to our core principles of providing equitable access to care. So we want to get it full and keep it full, I guess was our motto early on, was trying to find a way to get the machine full and then to maintain it and keep it busy and full. So, oops, there we go. So first thing we did was identify efficiencies. We wanted to try to identify the inefficiencies and identify the efficiencies in order to use the machine in a very efficient way. So the first few weeks of treatment, we treated 1 patient per hour. And we did that so that we could have our team of physicians, physicists, and therapists in the room, engaged with treatment patients, to work together to identify opportunities to improve our workflow in the treatment room. So an hour gives you plenty of time between patients. You screw something up, you got plenty of time to reset the patient up. You know, we had to learn how to set patients up properly and use the IGRT system early on. And so we spent about an hour per patient, and the whole team really learned how the machine worked and how workflow is going to work. So then the next month, we booked patients every half hour, and every half hour was great. We continue to get buy-in from our therapists and our physics staff to improve efficiencies. So every half hour with a 10-hour day, that allows us to treat 20 patients a day. We wanted to improve on that. So we work with our therapists and our physics staff, and we're able to move that down to 20 minutes. So 20 minutes took us from 20 patients a day to 30 patients a day with a 10-hour day. Now today we treat more than 10-hour days, but back then we're looking at a 10-hour day would be a reasonable day. I'll tell you in a little bit where we are now, but it's more than a 10-hour day. So we got to 20 minutes. And then we worked with our partner Mevion at trying to find ways to collaborate with Mevion to even make it more efficient. And they came up with 2 fixes to our unit. And the 2 fixes were one with image guidance with the KV system in order to get the tube and the image intensifier out at the same time instead of sequentially. That saved us a minute or 2. And also to get the beam out of the machine, initially, it would take 2 or 3 minutes. And I don't know what they did, but they made things work in series, and however they did. But now we're getting beam a lot quicker than we did before. And sometimes the beam would fault, but they were able to get it to reset quicker. And so we're able to save a couple minutes there as well. So we're able to shave 2 minutes off that 20-minute time slot. Now, 2 minutes may not sound like a lot to you, but when you're working with, let me fix my mouse here. When you're working with going from 18 minutes to, from 20 minutes to 18 minutes, now we're up to a 12-hour workday. So a 12-hour day, you're saving 6 minutes an hour. 12 hours is 72 minutes. Divided by 18 is 4 extra patient treatments. 4 doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. This allows us, it goes right to the bottom line. Number one, there's 4 extra patients, and it allows us to make protons more accessible to our patients in our community. And so that was a big thing for us. So we have 18-hour time slots now, and we treat around 45 patients a day, and so that takes us about 15 hours. You can do the math, about 15 hours a day. So now that we've found ways to increase the machine capacity, we want to make sure that we manage our patients efficiently through the intake process. And so now we put a new team together. The new team we put together is to look at the intake and pre-treatment process. And this team, we put together a working group. Our intake staff, these are the guys and gals that take phone calls from referring physicians or patients. We have our billing staff on this team, our nursing staff, our physicists and dosimetrists, to find a way to shorten the time from inquiry or referral, whatever you want to call it, to the first treatment. And my thesis has been that if that process takes too long, patients are less likely to get treated. The longer you take, it's directly or inversely proportional to the number of patients that get treated. And so if we can shorten that, we'll make sure that we have a robust system to get patients into our system and keep them treated. So what we do is we offer consultations either the same day or next day. If someone calls in the morning, we offer them that afternoon. If someone calls in the afternoon, we offer them the next day. They don't always take that. We offer it, and we'll make it happen because we're there treating patients anyway. We'll make that happen that same day or next day. But frequently they want to bring their spouse or their child, and they'll make it a few days later. Before the patient even walks into our building staff are already all over it. They're already verifying insurance and working on getting authorization, or working on getting either authorization because they work with the physicians to know what the diagnosis is and kind of know where our head's at. But they'll tell us, if they can't get authorization, they'll tell us whether or not we will be able to will be successful or not in obtaining an authorization for proton beam therapy. So we know that when the patient comes and sees us, and so this allows us as physicians and our nurses and our social workers to better manage patients' expectations. So we can pivot, if need be, to treat the patient with IMRT, to treat the patient with stereotactic radiosurgery, whatever it might be. We know it on the front end. We can manage expectations more properly, and this means that we need to engage our billing staff and our social workers and our nurses early on the front end. And then what we also do, hang on, here we go, is over the years, since we put in our proton unit, we've added a lot of ancillary services to our practice that we didn't have before. We have an MRI now, a dedicated MRI in the building. We had PET CT before, but we're utilizing that even more. We have mammography in our office. We have ultrasound in our office. We do interventional procedures in our office. As you would suspect, we have a significant proportion of our patients that are prostate cancer patients. We do the SpaceOAR procedure in our office. We've done before SpaceOAR, we did fiducials in our office. We put fiducials in our prostates. We put fiducials in liver cancers. We do all that in the office so that we don't have to, so that we'd speed up the time. We don't have to figure out what hospital to send the patient to and who's going to do the SpaceOAR procedure. It allows us to work more efficiently and to narrow that, or to tighten up that time from inquiry to treatment. And now our inquiry to treatment time is about 2 weeks. It could be quicker if someone needs to be, with someone coming out of town, but generally it averages about 2 weeks between when they call us to when they get treated. And that's allowed us to keep it allows us to, the dollars we spend on marketing, or the effort we spend on marketing, not just the dollars, but the effort we spend visiting with physicians and interacting with other physicians, interacting with the community, those energies are used more efficiently if we can treat those patients more quickly and be more efficient in the way we take patients from inquiry to treatment. And that's allowed us to be able to, in just 7 years, treat 2,000 patients in just one room. And so just this last week, we celebrated, oops, I'm hitting the wrong button here. There we go. 7 years, 2,000 patients, one room. I got 2 clickers. So just this last week, we celebrated the completion of treatment of our 2,000 patient. That's the woman on your left. She's a left-sided breast cancer patient. And on the right is our 1,000 patient. And so the woman on the right, she is a Hodgkin's disease survivor. She finished radiation about 3 years ago. And we do this little thing. We don't have a bell. Instead, what we do is we meet with our patient the last day of treatment. We give them a challenge coin. You might have seen these before. The military does them a lot. These really nice challenge coins. And we have our physician give the patient the challenge coin. And they keep that in their pocket. And you'd be surprised, some of them make it into jewelry. But they all keep it in their pocket. So about 3 years ago, when Alyssa on the right finished her treatment, the very first patient, his name is RB, he gave Alyssa his challenge coin. And then last week, Alyssa gave Ms. Orgod her challenge coin. And so it was a very, very sweet thing, a very sweet ceremony that we did. It was very nice that some of the Mevion staff were down there. So anyway, the other thing I want to state is that treating a good number of patients, all of us treating a good number of patients is good for all of us. Because the more patients that I see and treat and whose lives I affect in a positive way, they have family and friends that will have cancer tomorrow. And when they have good outcomes and they have good quality of life, their family and friends are going to seek out proton therapy, wherever it may be. And so I can't tell you how many patients I've seen over the years whose cousin or someone received radiation for their prostate cancer at Loma Linda, and they live in Jacksonville, or who were treated at the University of Florida, their family or friends, and had a good outcome there. And they're coming to me because of convenience or whatever reason it might be. And I know that I have patients who tell me that I still see them follow up, that their brother or sister or cousin is treated at Emory, because before Emory was even open, we would see patients from North Georgia and the Carolinas, but now those patients are going to Emory, and it's all good, because the more people that get treated with proton therapy have good outcomes, it really is better for all of us. I guess the adage that when the tide rolls in, all boats rise is a good adage for this. So thank you.
Dr. Ackerman. So we see that you not only have a very efficient operation, but it's really like a family. And with that, I'd like to welcome the newest member of the Mevion family, Kansas City Urology Care. And we're going to hear from their CEO, Keith Potter, who brought this physician-owned proton center to Kansas. And also speaking with him will be Dr. Mark Thompson, who brings over 20 years of experience in several modes of radiation therapy and is looking forward to bringing protons to his patients as well. So we'll start with Keith Potter.
Thank you. Well, it's a pretty good day for me today. I'm a graduate of the University of Kansas, and we had a pretty good night last night after about 20 minutes of awful stressing. But My only regret is I'm here speaking instead of going to a parade tomorrow. Thanks, Lino, for the timing of all this. But no, I'm happy to be here and to tell you a little bit about our journey so far. I mean, we're still pretty early in it. We've only been doing this since about October of last year. So just to tell you a little bit about our practice, we are the largest urology group in the metro area of Kansas City. Covers both Kansas and Missouri state line. We were founded in 1999. We were a group of 4 groups of urology, 4 practices that came together at a time when there was some consolidation in the urology world. In 2006, In 2006, we opened our first radiation center in Overland Park, Kansas. And the goal there was to create an integrated cancer model where we would take care of our prostate cancer patients from the PSA to the biopsy to either surgery or radiation, and open up the communication between the doctors and the patients. And it's been wildly successful. In 2017, we added a medical oncologist, and we started taking that part of the practice. In 2019 is when Dr. Thompson and Dr. Kumar joined us, and at that time we opened our second radiation center in Independence, Missouri. So we were on both sides of the state line. We've continued to get busier and busier. Dr. Thompson and Kumar are very entrepreneurial and some of the hardest working doctors I know. They have an incredible engine, and it doesn't ever seem to slow down. So currently we have 13 locations around the city, and we also go to several outreach clinics around the states of Kansas and Missouri. We are organized as an S corporation, and there's a reason I'm telling all this boring stuff here. So the S corporation, and we operate and have radiation in our facility under the Stark Law and the in-office ancillary exception. And so, you know, we've added ancillary services over the years, so it allows us to remain independent. Independent practices in the United States are a dwindling creature, and we are fierce proponents of independent practice. We think it brings innovation and brings a better quality of care overall. We have, right now we are the only freestanding radiation center in the entire Kansas City metro area. All right, I think you're up.
Okay, basically, if you know Kansas City, State Line Road runs right down the center of the city. I live on State Line Road itself. Half of the city is in Missouri and half of the city is in Kansas. We have 2 radiation centers, one on the Missouri side and one on the Kansas side. We've always had the best photon delivery equipment available. We've had TrueBeams, we have Eclipse, treatment planning, ARIA. We were the first providers of RapidArc in the city, in the metropolitan area. In addition to that, our urologists were the first to offer robotic surgery, even before the academic center. So we've always been on top of the technology. So the next natural step we knew in the future was going to be protons. We just didn't think that protons were going to be this soon. About just over a year and a half ago, I was driving past the University of Kansas Cancer Center. We call it KU. I was driving by KU, the main campus in Kansas City, Kansas. And I saw the walls for the proton vault going up. We knew KU was thinking about doing the protons. I didn't think they were going to pull the trigger this soon. We have a very high volume, prostate volume. And I knew with the new technology, with their superior technology and their superior advertising budget to what we had, they were basically going to be advertising a smartphone, we'd be advertising a flip phone. We were not going to win that marketing battle. So I would estimate we're going to lose at least 25% of our patients to protons if we didn't keep up with the technology. So it was and this is a big deal in radiation. As you all know, radiation oncology has high fixed costs. the equipment, the building, the staff. There are a lot of fixed costs. So say with a high volume practice like this, say half the patients go to pay the overhead, half go to the profit. So if we treat 100 patients per year, the first 50 are going to pay the overhead, the next 50 are going towards the profit. If we gain just one patient, that's pure profit. The only extra cost to us is a little bit of electricity. On the converse, if you lose patients, it's all from the top, it's all the profit patients. So if we lose 25% of the patients, true, it might only be 25 out of 100 patients, but it's 25 out of 50 profit patients. So it's a potential of losing 50% of the profit. So we knew we had to do something to protect ourselves. And we had a lot to lose. We're at very high volume practice. The two of us see almost 1,000 new consults per year for prostate cancer. Our therapists and nurses and physicists and dosimetrists treat almost all prostate cancer. More than 95% of our patients are prostate patients. So we're very efficient at prostate cancer and very effective at delivering prostate cancer care effectively and with a high quality. In addition to that, because of all this, we didn't want to lose this. We wanted to stay on top of our game, providing the best care to the patients. So the first thing we had to do was convince our 30 urology partners that we needed protons. I met with every urologist personally on the Missouri side to explain the benefit and the risks if we didn't do the protons. Dr. Kumar met with every single urologist individually on the Kansas side. Every single urologist was against the proton therapy. Every single urologist had heard about the proton centers that had gone under because of the excessive debt. They all knew that almost exclusively proton centers are located at academic centers. And everyone knows that academic centers have a lot more donations. And these donations are funding a high percentage of the units or all of the units in some cases. We have zero money donated to us. So this had to be financially feasible. And so it was a very tough sell. In addition to this, we spent 3 months with meetings going over those things. Almost every week we had another meeting for this 3-month period. And if you've all talked to doctors, every single doctor thinks he's the smartest person in the room. Just ask him, okay? So it was very difficult getting these 30 doctors to agree, okay? We finally got buy-in after 3 months. I was surprised it happened in 3 months. Within 3 months, 29 out of the 30 partners voted to move ahead with the proton unit. So our first step was finding who are we going to use for the expertise for the protons. I contacted a physicist who was working with one of the major academic centers in the US that had just acquired a proton unit. And he worked with us, he evaluated our practice, and he recommended that we get a Mevion unit. Because of the superior technology, it has a much smaller footprint, so the construction costs are significantly less, and the construction time is less. So this was going to help us to catch up with KU, who had already started their unit. In addition to this, they have much better financial efficiency. Not only is the building less, but the yearly maintenance fees are significantly less. And costs are extremely important in a primary care practice. If you're not aware, hospitals can bill anywhere from 3 to 4 times. They collect 3 to 4 times what we can collect at an outpatient freestanding clinic for the exact same service. So we have to be more efficient, and we have to be very careful with the money we spend in order to make it. So it was an uphill battle. The cards are stacked against you as a private practice performing protons than if you're at an academic or hospital-based center. So we identified that we wanted to work with Mevion because of these features. So I called Mevion and I emailed Mevion. I called and emailed ABI and Varian. And Lionel and Mevion, they worked with us to meet every one of these criteria that we needed to be successful. This would not have happened without them. I'm not sure if you watched the basketball game last night. KU played North Carolina. Roy Williams, he used to be the coach at KU. He switched to North Carolina, and subsequently he recently retired. At halftime, KU was down by 15 points. And no team in the national championship game has come back from 15 points to win the national championship game. Why the announcers were there at halftime, behind him, a little kid had a sign that says, Roy Williams left KU for a reason. Well, we picked Mevion for a reason. KU came back to win, We picked Mevion because they could meet all the boxes to make this work financially, and they gave us all the support that we needed to make this win. KU came back to win, and we're going to be very successful with this because of all the support we've gotten from Mevion and Lionel and everyone else. It's amazing the amount of support we had. They've walked us through every single step of the way, and Keith is going to give us a little information on how this happened.
You know, on top of, just to add on the internal support, not only was it to get consensus of moving forward with Proton, but it was much larger than that. We were deciding what kind of facility we were going to build, whether we were going to move our current practice there, where the building was going to be located, how big the building was going to be, what services we were going to provide. So there was a lot to get done and a lot to convince these guys that this is the right way to move forward. So during the financing aspect of the project, I mentioned earlier we're an S-Corp. Well, in an S-Corp, if you run a private practice, the doctor's revenue or the doctor's take-home pay is what's left. So the more money you spend, the less money the doctors take home. So one of my goals has always been when I purchase a capital asset is to even out that cost. So I do that through a leasing mechanism where you can take 100% of the depreciation or 100% of the deductibility of the payments with no depreciation. Depreciation on a tax basis is very uneven. It's 20% in the first year. If it's a 5-year asset, it's 20%, then it's 32%, then it's 20%, and it goes down to 11%. So on a very large asset, particularly the size, the cost of a Proton unit, you're talking a very, very wide swing of costs. So our goal was to go out and find a partner that would allow us to lease the unit and so it would even out the costs. The other aspect that was a challenge was the timing, and because of the amount of time from the beginning of the project to operation, there's a big dead period. So there's a lot of interim financing that goes on in this process, and so it's also a challenge to find somebody that's willing to do that. The other aspect was COVID. I mean, COVID was, we were right in the midst of it when all this stuff started. When we went to the Ackerman Center, we all had to mask up, and we had to have proof that we were negative and all this kind of stuff. And I never attended more Zoom meetings. I learned what Zoom was, and then we would, you know, some days we're 12 hours on a Zoom call, which is quite exhausting, and not to mention the uncertainty of the period of time. All right. As far as the location goes, we had to go out and in search of the location. So our biggest goal was to find some place that was easy access from the highway. Our current location sits in Overland Park, right off of I-35. Thank you. Right off of I-35, and it's very, very close to get off the highway. So we were looking for that kind of a location. The next item was to really develop the business plan. With all the unknowns of fractionation coming and the alternative payment models coming on and the payer unknowns, it was a challenge to come up with a pro forma just to kind of pick up all of the different aspects that were going on. The first thing we did is we visited the Ackerman Center in October of 2018, or 2018, I guess it was 2020. Seems like it was 2018. It seems like a long time ago. And we were at dinner with Dr. Thompson, Dr. Kumar, and Dr. Hedinger and I were at dinner after visiting. And Dr. Thompson asked me, he says, so give me your honest opinion, what kind of chance do you think we have to pulling this off? And my answer was, there is no chance of pulling this off. This is a big project. It's a lot to do, and I just didn't think we could get there. But the convincing of the doctors, they were able to do it. The other thing that made this a very valid business plan was we didn't do anything other than count on our own patients. So we were successful looking at our own current patient base, and then from this point, then if we added patients, then it was going to be even more successful. The other aspect of what we did is we went to each of the community hospitals, and there are a lot of systems in Kansas City. I think we have 4 or 5 hospital systems in the community. So we set out to meet with all the CEOs of these hospitals to let them know what we were doing. We didn't want it to be a surprise. And we wanted to make sure that they understood that we wanted to be a community resource for them for proton therapy. Some of them asked, I mentioned earlier that we need to fall under the Stark rules. And so some of them asked, well, why, you should have come to us, we could have joint ventured and done these things. Well, that would have been great, but the federal government would prevent us from doing that, so we had to go it alone. As far as the building finance and equipment finance, we started into this process, and I was starting to have conversations with banks by myself, and it became pretty apparent pretty quickly that I needed some assistance. So we engaged an owner's rep to help us with the building, and he had lots of resources at banks, and he was able to get us in contact with several of his contacts, and it helped a lot. It helped a lot. We wanted to go into this looking at getting limited guarantees for the building. We needed to have a bank that would finance the building, and we were really looking for an operating lease for the cyclotron that would be 100% financed, and which would mean no down payment. So it was, for the banks, it was really, it was hard for them to get their arms around the project. There's not a lot of secondary market for proton units out there, and the technology is, the banks don't have the opportunity to finance these things very often, so it was very, it was difficult to get over that hurdle. But we found Union Bank and Union Financing, and it was a home run. They hit every mark we needed to hit, and it's been a very, very nice process that we've gone through, and it's been successful thus far. Then we had to quickly establish a team of contractor. We contracted with McCarthy Construction. We had a doctor that was familiar with that entity. I'm really bad at that, aren't I? We had a doctor that was familiar with McCarthy, and then the other advantage was McCarthy had just completed a vault for Mevion in St. Louis, and we also wanted a local flavor, and they have a local office here in Kansas City, so that was important. Lastly, the other challenge was all the simultaneous decisions that had to be made. We had to purchase land, we had to come up with the equipment financing, we had to design the building. We even designed the building before the closing of the property because we wanted to shorten the time frame in which we were able to get up and running. And then we also had to decide what services to move, whether we were going to move our business office, our urology office, our labs, and those things. So there were a lot of decisions to be made. The timeline, just real quickly looking at it, we visited Ackerman in 2020, October, and we went through this process, and by September of 2021, we closed on the property, we closed on the equipment, and in October we broke ground. So it was a whirlwind year. So we decided to we decided on land that was really, it was actually across the street from our current location, next to a Topgolf. And the very first thing we discovered was a whole lot of rock when we started digging. And when you're digging a vault, rock is not good. But we hauled a lot of rock away. We had to deal with building delays from the city and other things. But during that time, we also decided to build a new LINAC vault as well as install a PET CT. So, all right, one more. So then today everybody knows the cost of everything is going up, and so we picked almost the absolute worst time in the world to build a building. If you really break it down, and the cost of it's just gone crazy. We've had weather delays. We've had the city requirements, city planning come back and say we have to do all these things. One example is that we had to install benches on a pathway that was like a half mile from the site because that was what was in the original documents when we sold the land. So.
feet. The building's 32,000 square feet. The floor plan's not that interesting. The takeaway is the Mevion Proton Vault's only about 1,200 square feet. Our LINAC Vault's 1,100 square feet. So it's minimally larger space than you need for a LINAC. The next important thing about the design is that it's a multidisciplinary clinic. We have medical oncology, infusion suites, we have PSMA PET-CT, we have radiotherapeutics, we have the proton unit, a TrueBeam, we have pathology, and we have urology, and we have urology special procedure space. So everything's under one roof for true multidisciplinary care for the outstanding treatment of prostate cancer.
So just to finish up, looking at the timeline, we started site work in October, and everything goes correct. We're going to be opening with patients in October of 2023. I think our roof is getting installed this week, which is kind of exciting, and they're going to begin the foundation. Lastly, what I would close with is, you know, the exciting thing is our doctors, and what I've always appreciated working with them since 2006, and is their vision for excellence for patient care, and looking at opportunities to bring high quality care at a fair price to our patients. We always look at it as we want to be on the cutting edge, but not the bleeding edge. So we try to be advanced, but we don't want to be too advanced where we get out in front of our skis. So I would say that looking at creating a team to get this done, it takes a lot of people and a lot of smart people, a lot smarter than me, to get things moving along and get everybody on board. And Mevion and UBT and all the folks that we've dealt with thus far have helped make that possible. We look forward to our future, and I think it's bright. And we thank you for allowing us to talk today.
Thank you. That's a great story about Kansas City, and I'm sure we're only at halftime, and you guys are going to be charging ahead, and KU can stick to basketball, unless you're going to have a basketball team. Then, all right. So we'll let them stick to basketball. We'll stick to protons. But the team requires a lot of disciplines, and finance is a key one. And so we're really happy to have from Omaha, Nebraska, Brian Donahue, president of Union Equipment Finance, and he's going to speak about his role in bringing the proton capabilities.
Thank you, Skip. All right, thank you. Well, money's not as interesting as hearing about medical practices, but money's got a role, right? So just a quick word about us. Union Equipment Finance is a full-service equipment financing and leasing unit. We're part of a bank. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of Union Bank and Trust. Union Bank and Trust is a family-owned bank started in 1917. We're based in Lincoln, Nebraska, so close enough to share in the Jayhawk joy, right? Over $6.5 billion in bank assets and getting closer to $50 billion in trust assets. We've got a huge college savings plan area, a huge retirement plan area, and a lot of big trust assets as well. The full menu at Union Bank includes commercial real estate, which is important. It was important in some of the most recent things we worked on, but also commercial lending. So there's a lot going on there. Proton projects are expensive, they're complicated, and what makes it more interesting, I think, and more complicated is you'll see practices that are huge. There may be huge hospitals, university or privately owned entities. You might see nonprofits, really large entities. You'll see practices with many physicians, like KCUC. You may see practices with one owner. You may see startups. You're going to see all of those things, And so I'm kind of starting a little bit broad here because there's so many different kinds of options available. But broadly, on the equipment side, which is where I spend my time, there's equipment interim funding before the permanent financing, and then permanent financing or leasing if leasing is the option chosen. Real estate, kind of similar. You've got an interim period of time. Some of these projects are quite long, and then you've got permanent financing as well. They're both critical to get that done. All kinds of funding options, and not in any particular order, but starting with equity sources. You may see equity being infused by owners. You may see outside private equity firms who provide funding. There could be cash coming from the entity. Maybe it's an entity like a nonprofit that has a lot of cash. You may see mezzanine financing, which is kind of like equity. You see loan financing. You see lease financing, which is a lot of what we do. And you see tax-exempt financing. And there are a lot of different types of tax-exempt financing. You could see bonds. You could see certain kinds of leases. Generally speaking, you're talking about public municipal type entities, but it could be a large entity through a conduit kind of structure. So there's a lot of ways to get that done, a lot of funding options there. Oops, there we go. So product-wise, broadly, the tool belt I have would be loans and leases. With loans, you see lines of credit. At the interim stage, you see fixed rate loans, variable rate loans. On the lease side, you see true leases where our customer, the end user, lets us take depreciation and they get to deduct payments. You might see a conditional sale lease where the customer decides, well, we want depreciation. Maybe the situation requires that. A lot of planning topics in no particular order, but starting with market studies. There needs to be some aspect of feasibility. Going to the left, vendor screening and selection is important. The developer and designer selection, financing options, that's all part of the discussion. All these are key planning topics for any practice. It's important to a lender, too, to know these have gone through that process. Financing providers and business plans in some detail, of course. And then you have to have timelines as well. There are a lot of concerns that come up, and this is typical in any kind of financing, but just to give you a little flavor without going into a ton of detail on that slide, people are concerned about delays until revenue comes in. They're concerned about equipment payments and the affordability, real estate payments and the affordability. So what we try to do is listen to the concerns and then have some sort of interim financing available with relatively sensible ways to pay for the interest, usually at the back end before the permanent financing starts. That makes it a little bit easier to deal with without as many worries. With equipment payments, we can use balloons and residuals to make the payments lower. Sometimes you can have a little bit of a delay or a lower payment at the start to make it more affordable, because this is all about affordability. If it's a new relationship with a vendor, if it's a new relationship with an equipment type, there has to be research that goes into that. And then understanding the insurance side is important as well. These are the structuring topics. These are the kinds of things that any lender would look at. We want to know these things, including what's going to be the ownership structure of everything that goes into an entity. And then leasing is a topic that has come up quite a lot. And what you see in many cases is you'll see that people can't use the depreciation for whatever reason. They have perhaps a lot of the income is distributed. There could be other factors, as Keith referred to. People generally want low payments. Leasing can do that for you. Cash conservation is important. A lot of times you don't have to put out a lot of money at the start. And so in that sense, it's flexible. Flexibility is key to what we do. And taking it to a more practical situation for an existing practice, and not everything is exactly like this. As I said, everything is different and unique and requires custom structuring. But in this case, we looked at historic financial statements of owners, historic tax returns of the business and owners, business plans and forecasts, equipment cost and other details, real estate financing details, and then any long-range plans that are important so that we know that the practice has thought about the different what-ifs along the way. And so what that solution looks like in this particular case, and they're not all going to be the same, but in this case, we had an interim pre-lease equipment financing arrangement where that loan was in place. The interest is paid much later. The permanent equipment financing is a true lease structure. We call it a First Amendment or a pro-lease, but basically it's a particular type of residual that allows us to have a residual in the equipment. The permanent lease is 100% financing, pro rata owner guarantee, so they're limited in that sense. Every situation's different, and our job is to listen and to figure out exactly what that needs to be and the custom structure based on that situation. All right, there we go.
Thank you, Brian. It's great to have the team pulling together. Let's move ahead from financing, construction, opening the center, and to do so, I want to welcome from the University of Utah, which opened the first proton center in the Mountain States. It's been open 9 months now at the Huntsman Cancer Institute. This facility is the center of a vast underserved proton area. And so I'd like to introduce Dr. Matthew Poppe, who will share his experience over these 9 months in bringing this much anticipated technology to his patients.
Thanks, Skip. So you'll see that Mevion's got units for everyone. We are a different center than you've heard before. We are that academic center. And I want to just showcase why Mevion's the right size for us and why it worked out really well for our patient population. So I'm the clinical director of our new proton center. I treat mainly pediatrics, but I also treat adult breast and sarcoma patients. So this is the Huntsman Cancer Institute. The Cancer Institute's only been around for 20 years. It's on the University of Utah campus in Salt Lake City. It started out as a research institute. If you look at the center of the building, to the right was the initial research institute. They added the first patient hospital on the left. It was a 50-bed hospital. We sit on the first floor of that hospital with 5 linear accelerators. And then they added another 50-bed hospital next to it. They're adding a third 50-bed hospital currently under construction, and they've expanded the research institute off to the left. And one of the things that was important for us in bringing on Mevion was that we could actually build a unit that was on our main campus that allowed us to not divide our team. We had a relatively small team, and we wanted to make sure that we could add a proton facility to our single site without having to send part of our team to another location across town. So here's a map of the comprehensive cancer centers throughout the country, and you can see the big void in this Mountain West region for protons. So the triangles represent the NCCN centers that have proton therapy centers. My patients were traveling 12 hours, either to Seattle, Phoenix, or San Diego to receive proton therapy. And over the years, a greater proportion of patients were having to leave the state. And so there'd really been a demand from patients and from providers that we bring proton therapy to this region. So I'm going to touch on some of our initial goals, our training plan, how we've advanced through different disease sites, and where we are with our census. And then I want to touch on CT on rails, which we feel has been really instrumental in allowing us to provide the good quality, high complexity of care that we do. So this center was paid for mainly by Huntsman Cancer Foundation dollars, so donors. We did not have to take out a loan, so we didn't have a mortgage to pay. We wanted to stay within an 8 to 10 hour treatment day, and at least initially. And so we projected we'd be treating 10 to 15 patients a day, at least 2 to 4 patients with anesthesia, which we knew was going to take longer. On our LINAC, we usually budget up to an hour for that, especially for CSI patients. We thought we'd have 25% of our patients would be kids, and that we'd ramp up over a 6-month period, and we'd appropriately add increased complex areas and new sites of disease. We specifically met with all of our attending physicians, and it was decided that we would not be treating proton patients. We felt that if we opened the door to protons for one patient, we wouldn't be able to say no to other patients, and we knew we wouldn't have the capacity to treat our busy proton or our busy prostate patient practice. And most of our prostate physicians were treating patients with SBRT and brachytherapy, and they didn't feel like that they would want patients on protons at this time. So for our initial training, we added physicists, we added dosimetrists. We spent about 2 years training the technical staff, and then we started training the MD physicians, initially with monthly educational sessions. We all attended various educational courses. There's several great ones that many of you were part of. We had arranged for the physicians to attend some away shadow experiences. Unfortunately, COVID decided otherwise, and so all of our training had to be virtual. We started replanning our photon cases with dosimetry. So once we had the software to plan protons, we sat down with our disease site teams, and we would replan our pediatric and our CNS and our head and neck plans with protons, and then we'd meet with outside physicians who would then review those plans and give us feedback as to how we did and if they would have done things any different. Here you see the staff physicians. We feel like all of our staff physicians should have protons available based on the disease sites they treat. We don't have just a dedicated proton team. Right now, about half of the attending physicians are utilizing protons in their practice. As we've expanded past peds and CNS, we've added head and neck, we've added some lung and lymphoma, and so we've incorporated the majority of the physicians, and as we add motion management, we're going to pick up the remainder of the physicians in our practice. Here you see our medical physicists. 3 of them have been dedicated as the primary for proton physics, and then we have several that are secondary proton physicists, and they've really provided outstanding both education and quality service. So you can see how we've integrated the CT on Rails unit with our proton gantry on the right. Pretty similar to some of the conventional linear accelerator room sizes. So this star represents where we installed our unit, which I'm going to show you more here in just a minute. I wanted to just give kind of a 10,000-foot overview is like where we sit within the University of Utah and Salt Lake. So we're up on this hillside. The Huntsman Cancer Institute is on the far right with the medical complex, and then the university campus stretches all the way to the football stadium, which is down on the far left. You can see with the bright lights. The Great Salt Lake and the airport are off in the distance towards the sunset. And then this is a view looking towards the back side of the campus, which is the Wasatch Mountain Range. So you see the Huntsman Cancer Institute on the far left in that photo. So this is the medical complex. The Cancer Institute's on the left, the main university hospital in the middle, and then the Children's Hospital is on the far right side. And I think one of the nice features about having the proton therapy unit associated with our hospital and not off-site is it allows us to provide high-level acuity of care. So we can provide proton services for patients that have inpatient rehabilitation needs. Pediatric patients on a ventilator come over with the ICU team or with the Life Flight team. When I would send patients to Seattle and San Diego, those are off-site centers, they couldn't provide services for those patients, and I had to treat them with photon-based treatment. This here represents where our proton gantry was installed. The building on the left is our Cancer Hospital, and then on the right is our research institute. The schematic of our department has this in line with all of our photon-based linear accelerators. So 1 through 5 are our photon linear accelerators. We then have a PACU staffed anesthesia recovery room, and then you continue down the hallway right into the proton gantry. When we built the proton building, we also put in a dedicated exam room for doing on-treatment visits for our proton patients and a waiting room for patients. Any of the attending physicians anywhere in the department can be called to either the photon or the proton machine to review image guidance, and within 60 seconds we can be there and are available. So it's very convenient for us. It was dedicated to Senator Orrin G. Hatch, one of Utah's longest serving senators, who helped bring in the political power to really make this happen, and he helped with the financing. There you can see the completed building on the right. So we started breaking ground November of 2018, and it required a fair amount of excavation work. We had to build an access road, so we decided to excavate for a second vault while we were excavating for the first vault to save the cost of having to get the equipment and rebuild the access road, since the access road was taken away once our proton vault was installed. So you see a couple phases of that excavation project. Here you see the synchrotron being lowered into the building roughly 16 months after we started the first earth moving. And then with room for the second vault just to the side of this vault. And then the roof was placed. Spent about 14 months doing commissioning, and then we, with acceptance and commissioning, and we treated our first patient 14 months after the synchrotron was dropped into our building. So we treated our first patient in May of 2021. So our daily census has been slowly increasing. Our goal, again, was 10 to 15 patients. We thought we'd only have 2 to 4 kids a day. We're now up to about 10 to 15 patients a day, which is taking us to the 8 to 10 hour day that we were planning for. We schedule 30-minute slots and 60 minutes for our pediatric anesthesia cases. And there you see where we are with our 8-hour treatment day. Unfortunately, but not unfortunately, because I think it's a great thing, we've averaged over 50% of our census with kids, and at times we've been up to 80 to 100%. And so when we treat 4 or 5 pediatric CSI cases, and so that occupies 5 hours of our day, which is 5 patients, it can be a challenge to have a higher census. Luckily, the hospital has been very supportive of that. And as we continue to increase efficiencies in our system, including trying to get a second anesthesia team, we'll continue to improve that to allow more patients to utilize this resource. We really do see this as a precious resource within our community, and we want to make sure we can put it to the best use. We've progressed in sites through all of these disease sites within the first 6 months. The thoracic and lymphoma cases, we're still going to maximize best when we incorporate our breath holding and our motion management imaging, which we're in the process of commissioning. So we have 4 different image guidance techniques for our room. We have a built-in Mevion Verity KV orthopair system, which we're very familiar with because we've been using a similar system in our photon-based rooms. We had a CT on rails unit with one of our photon gantries, and we wanted that excellent quality imaging available for our proton patients, and so we installed a dual energy CT on rails unit in our proton vault. And then we have 2 motion management systems, one with image guidance, or one with surface guidance, and one with SDX breath hold monitoring. So why CT on rails for a proton vault? So our rationale was that we had the experience and we knew that there was no parallel to the good quality imaging that a CT on rails could offer compared to fan-based imaging, which we have also used quite often. and that our head and neck, GI, and GU physicians very much valued this tool, and we felt it would help speed up any replanning that might have to be done. We knew that proton patients were likely going to need more replanning than photon patients, given the complexity of dose with anatomical changes to the patient, and we wanted to streamline that process. We wanted to be able to send the CT on rail DICOM system directly back to dosimetry and save a resimulation. And we wanted to be able to show our attending physicians what dose might be going on based on a change in the anatomy. And sometimes it actually allows us to determine that we don't need to do a replan and we can save anesthesia for pediatric cases that might need extra anesthesia sessions or a big disruption to the simulation schedule. So what are some of the myths that we found have been dispelled with the CT on rails unit? So one of the myths is that it surely must be slower than imaging on isocenter. Actually, we found it's not. The acquisition of the image on the CT on rails unit only takes a few seconds. The robotic couch moves back to isocenter while the therapist is doing the alignment and verification. And by the time that process is done, the patient is already back at isocenter, ready for treatment. And we feel because the quality of the images is that much better, the therapist can actually improve their ability to do the image registration, and the attending physician, if necessary, can make a judgment about treat, no treat, or replan in a much quicker period of time. So the other myth is that surely patients must move. By the time you have that robotic couch, you move to the CT on rails unit, and then you move them back to isocenter. If patients move, then the whole system is pointless. We've actually found that that is not the case. With over 10 years, with over a decade of use in our photon-based practice, we found that if you have the right robotic couch, you move the couch slowly and smoothly enough, patients can barely detect that there's any movement going on. And by increasing the time from acquiring the image to treating the patient by having good quality image, we actually leave them on the couch for a shorter period of time. Therefore, they're less likely to move, since time on the couch is the greatest predictor of movement. So we designed our room so that we can do all of the imaging from within the room. So we put a diagnostic section or a diagnostic workstation within the room with these lead-lined glass panels, so the therapist move the patient, acquire the CT image, do the registration all within the room. That allows our anesthesiology team to stay with the patient or behind the leaded glass, and we only move outside the vault when we're ready to treat the patient. So our initial experience is that the staff training was pretty straightforward, especially since we had already had trained staff on CT on rails. Many of them became our proton therapists when we trained them. Mevion was great at assisting us in refining our workflow for their particular system. We think there's still some opportunities to refine our workflow even further to become more efficient with greater throughput, which will allow us to treat more patients within our workday. But here's an example of something that just would have been missed or not appropriately found with just KV ortho pair. So this is a 4-year-old patient of mine with a recurrent Wilms tumor to the chest wall. Between the day of simulation and the first day of treatment, my proton plan with 2 oblique posterior beams would have been underdosing this tumor. Within a day, we had a replan from this CT on rails DICOM file that we were able to then quickly change and treat the patient with this updated data set. I think one of the real advantages is by the time that the physicist calls me to the machine, they've actually taken the CT on rails, imported it into our planning system, and they can show us what the actual dose delivered on the CT data set is. And you can see that on the bottom right is that dose difference in greater or lower dose. And we can make a decision about the need to replan or to even not treat on a given day based on what the reconstructed dose is. So where are our future directions? We think there's obvious opportunities for streamlining, going from 30-minute to 20-minute slots as other centers have been able to do, and I think we should be able to do that for simple cases. I think we can probably streamline our anesthesia cases to less than an hour, and all of that will allow us to treat more patients with this really precious resource. Mevion has certainly been open to helping us and work on these improvements and help stream our efficiencies. We have dual energy CT capability both in our simulation and now with our CT on rails. We haven't yet incorporated it, but once we do, we hope this will help with the robust optimization as we can decrease our range and uncertainty by utilizing the dual energy capabilities. And then, obviously implementing software that allows us to auto-contour targets and OARs for replanning will also help streamline our process. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Poppe. Let's move forward into the future quite a lot and look at a technology that's getting a lot of attention among clinicians and proton business discussions called FLASH. FLASH is the possibility to change the way cancer is treated someday. But today we have Dr. Rocky Owen from Mevion to share his recent visit to Washington University Medical Center, where he unveiled Mevion's FLASH accessory for customer research.
Thank you for the introduction. Today, I will be discussing Mevion's FLASH program, which encompasses both the research and technological innovations that we have conducted in direct support of providing our customers access to FLASH technology. And specifically, I'm thrilled to formally announce Mevion's FLASH accessory tool that can transform your superconducting synchrocyclotron into a FLASH research device. So to start, I would just like to provide an outline for my presentation in the form of an overview for how we plan to implement our technology to improve FLASH treatments. First, Mevion synchrocyclotron inherently has a high instantaneous dose rate, and this has been suggested to be important in inducing the FLASH effect. Second, with the release of Mevion's FLASH accessory kit, we are offering a cost-effective and time-efficient solution that allows our customers to perform FLASH research, and this will only drive the field further forward. And finally, with Mevion's efficient beam delivery system that can support merged field FLASH, merged field conformal FLASH, we believe that Mevion's S250i system can ultimately be the best platform for proton FLASH irradiations. And so now just to elaborate briefly on the inherent properties of the Mevion system that are beneficial for FLASH. FLASH is an ultra-high dose rate technique, typically 1,000 times higher in dose rate than conventional treatments. And so what's important is the pulse structure. And what we mean by that is the intra-pulse dose rate, meaning the dose that's delivered in a single pulse. This is shown on the x-axis here, and also the mean dose rate, which is essentially how fast can all of your dose be delivered. And so as you can see by the cluster of red triangles on the right, the pulsed electron beam devices that have shown a strong flash signal in recent studies all have a very high intrapulse dose rate. And so while continuous beam devices can struggle to produce that high instantaneous dose rate, that is an inherent property of the Mevion synchrocyclotron. And not only that, but we have the capability to modify the pulse structure in each dimension on this graph. And I think that's really a big positive. Furthermore, Mevion's direct beam system is ideal for delivering conformal FLASH treatments for a variety of reasons. So unlike systems that use an ESS, which can drastically reduce the delivery efficiency, especially for short-range targets, Mevion maintains greater than 70% delivery efficiency across all energies. And this is especially important as we start to move towards the clinic, because this will allow us to treat all disease indications, whether it be deep-seated or superficial skin lesion, we have the capability to treat it with our Bragg Peak flash. Furthermore, we also have the capability to perform extremely fast spot switching and layer switching, and then we can dynamically trim the low dose rate field edges using our adaptive aperture. Oops. So, while we're at this exciting point now in our flash program, this has been a lot of work that has gone into that. And so we started this a number of years ago with the discovery phase. And essentially, this was investigating what our beam output is in terms of pulse structure and dose rate. And we also consulted with experts in the field to understand how we could move forward best in this field and provide the best flash technology. So we worked very closely with Washington University, came up with some dosimetric experiments, which were super beneficial. And now we have sort of transitioned into the implementation phase, and we're sort of right at the end of that and very excited. And during this phase, we initiated our own research experiments at the Mevion factory. And this allowed us to use our own flash accessory device and iterate on the design to really provide the tools that are necessary to be successful for this flash research program. And as we look forward, we're starting to begin the expansion phase, and essentially this will just be expanding on our flash technology. We're planning to model the flash biological effectiveness, continue to develop the merged field delivery technique, as well as just overall provide performance enhancements to the flash technology. And so I think as I proceed through this talk, I really wanted to emphasize that the beauty of the design of this accessory is the fact that it works perfectly in conjunction with the clinical system, and yet it's completely independent. And so specifically, this flash accessory was designed with 3 specific priorities in mind. The first being safety, the second being measurement accuracy, and the third being time efficiency for installation and return to clinical configuration. And so I'll talk about each of these a little bit more in detail, but before I get too far down the rabbit hole, I would like to share our experience unveiling the flash accessory at Washington University a couple of weeks ago. And so here is an outline of our flash accessory. And so in this computer-aided design, you can see this is what I've been referring to as the flash accessory. And so it is, but in reality, we're actually providing an entire flash kit. So we're supplying the internal components and the beam configuration that enable the flash dose rates, as well as the accessory hardware mount, a flash transmission ion chamber, the beam modulating components, a separate flash to symmetry module, as well as a standalone research mode on the treatment console interface. And so here are a few images from us installing the flash accessory at Washington University. And with the help of Dr. Yao Hao and Dr. Tianyu Zhao, we were successfully able to install the accessory and run beam through it. So I just want to show a quick video, and I hope you'll sort of take note of the different components that are part of the flash accessory and sort of the workflow for installation and setup. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope it helped to illustrate, some of the specifics of the flash accessory. And what I really want to emphasize is how quickly this transforms your clinically operating system into a research device. And so essentially the method that we use to convert the clinical system to the flash research mode is you mount the flash accessory through that simple bolting process and connect all the cabling. You then switch from clinical mode to flash research mode on the treatment console. You apply a beam configuration to enable flash dose rates, and within minutes, you're ready to deliver flash treatments. And so this is, I think, really exciting for us because it allows the focus to be on the research as opposed to the installation or configuration of the device. And furthermore, all continued innovations will be built on this platform. So we're really excited about it. And furthermore, I just again want to emphasize that this flash accessory has been designed with safety in mind. So there's only a single point of contact with the clinical system, and this is an input that is delivered to the clinical system that says, yes, we are in flash mode, the accessory is installed, everything is working, and you're allowed to deliver flash treatments. And then the clinical system outputs a timing signal to the flash dosimetry system that says, hey, look out for the beam, and that allows us to accurately measure the output of the device. And we also have redundant signal monitors and beam parameter interlocks that prevent any crossover from the flash system to the clinical system. So this is an extra layer of safety, and what that allows us to do is that allows us to give the user access to modulate these tuning parameters and change the pulse structure, change the dose rate, and that's not worry that this is going to affect your clinical output at all. And finally, the thing that's really important for this flash research is accuracy of the measurement, because without that, the numbers are all over the place. And so we've done a lot of work developing this flash transmission ion chamber, and it has single pulse dose control. And so what that means is the flash dosimetry system is capable of accepting a target charge or pulse count and terminating the beam within a single pulse of meeting that objective. And furthermore, we can produce a linear response across a dynamic range between conventional and flash dose rates, which can be a factor of 1,000. So that's really important, and I think we put a lot of work in this area and are proud of what we've developed. So in practice, modulating the beam output, we use a number of different components. So one is a hole filter, and this allows us to create a spread out Bragg peak. And this was developed in conjunction with Washington University, and even since this presentation, they've come up with a new design that seems to be even better. So continued improvement. And we use boron carbide blocks for coarse range adjustment, polycarbonate slabs for fine range adjustment, and then we provide a set of brass collimators that allow you to collimate the size and shape of the beam output. And so interestingly, these figures are from a paper that we worked in collaboration with at Washington University, and it was just awarded the most cited in medical physics for 2021. So another exciting. And so now I just want to transition a little bit to the flash experiments, research experiments that we've performed at the Mevion facility. And I think this is important, again, because this allowed us to use our own device for these research efforts and improve on the design iteratively. But it also allowed us to understand, how we could potentially continue to move this technology forward, especially as we start to translate into a clinical technique. So to do this, we started by trying to sort of benchmark our flash effect with our system, and we did that by emulating two well-known flash studies. So the first was a mortality endpoint study that was performed by Dr. Liu at Stanford, and essentially this was a gut irradiation of mice between flash and conventional dose rates, and looking at sort of the weight loss and then determine the survivability between the two conventional flash treatments. And what we found was about a 30% increase in the survival of mice treated with flash as opposed to conventional treatments, and this was on par with what the Liu group found. And so that was a good step for us and validated that we were able to achieve the flash effect, and allowed us then to move forward to this EDU endpoint study, which is a little bit more technical and more biologically focused in terms of understanding the true response within the cells. And so essentially what this endpoint is looking at is the regeneration of healthy tissue following an irradiation. So we are able to count the number of EDU positive cells, which is a marker of regeneration of that healthy tissue, and then that will determine sort of how the normal tissue is responding after these radiation treatments. And so I'm going to specifically focus on that EDU study because it leads us, this was like our first test of the merge field flash approach, which we truly think can be the future of flash. So the idea of merge field is to sort of combine smaller fields into one large volume of flash. And so while each individual spot is delivered with a flash timescale, the two spots might be delivered a minute in between. And so that's not technically a flash timescale, but so long as we spatially keep these spots independent, we believe we can achieve that flash effect and then combine these smaller fields into a larger field. And if you've followed this research, this is similar to sort of the mini pig experiment where they irradiated a couple spots and they saw that flash effect on the same sample in close proximity to each other. So still a lot of work to do, but some preliminary results that we obtained in the last year. On the left, we irradiated mice with, again, in the gut and both flash and conventional treatments. And then 3.5 days after the irradiation, we injected them with the EDU marker, and we were able to then image this sample and count the EDU positive cells per crypt. And again, that's a measure of sort of the regeneration of healthy tissue, and it's specifically a marker for DNA synthesis. So here on the left, you can see the flash signal for the EDU green is much stronger than the conventional irradiated sample. And again, this is telling us that this sample is the regeneration of healthy tissue is strong compared to the conventional treatment. And quantitatively, we see that also on the right, that the flash samples were found to have a significantly higher number of EDU positive cells per crypt. And interestingly, double spot irradiated mice demonstrated a similar flash sparing compared to single spot irradiated mice. And that's a nice sort of validation for moving forward with this merge field approach. So just in conclusion, I think we all know that flash has a long road to really become a clinical modality, but Mevion is committed to developing the best platform for conformal flash treatments, and we plan to do this through continued development of flash technical capabilities, a customer-driven approach to the future of flash, and continued support for the clinical translation of flash treatments. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And I want to thank all of our speakers, if you'll help me thank all of our speakers for a very interesting program. And thank you for your attention. We don't have time for questions today, but if you have any questions, look for our speakers out at the sessions out there, or get any questions you have to myself or Lionel at Mevion, and we'll make sure you get an answer for them. Thank you again.